Unfortunately, I don't think this tree is going to be able to recover from the previous year's rabbits' attacks. Guten gardening, everybody. Well, this flavor top nectarine should be filled with fruit at this point. And as I look around, I see 1 or 2 nectarines on here. This is year 4 with this tree. And unfortunately, the first year especially, but the first and second years, we didn't do a very good job of protecting this tree in the winter time. And as a result, even though we did a really nice job of protecting it for the past 2 years, the rabbits came along and did quite a bit of damage, and we hoped that the tree would recover. And unfortunately, even though there was no additional damage last year, the fruit that came out on this tree was horrible. There was plenty of it, but it all rotted. There were lots of problems with it. None of it came to full maturity. And this year, as I said, I only see 1 or 2 fruits on here. And so, unfortunately, this is a tree that we're going to be cutting down. You know, one of the things about rabbits is they're kind of adorable, especially when they're little. The problem is they do become pretty bad garden pests, especially in this area. I would say second only to voles in terms of here at Guten gardening. But, you know, we have to learn to deal with them. We have to learn to protect our trees, protect our food more from them. Otherwise, they'll come along and they'll eat as much as they want to. Now, fortunately for us, we have a spot where we're going to be able to use all of this tree to help us with future growing. And I'm going to show you that spot right now. We've actually done a pretty good amount of content on the compost bins that are behind me. We've talked about a lot of the vegetables that we've grown in here. Compost bin gardening has been very successful for us over the years. And we also did a video where we talked about an easy way to create a Hugelkultur type setup inside of these compost bins. Now, previously we used a lot of the waste left over from a previous year's garden with some of our Brussels sprouts, the stem of the Brussels sprouts, among other things, some of the other yard waste in terms of limbs, etc. We also used some of our leaves and grass that we had collected over time. Well, we're going to do something very similar to that. We were just able to harvest the compost out of this bed. So in addition to growing some really great fruits and vegetables in these beds for the past year plus, now we were able to come in and get multiple bins worth of compost out of here. Compost that we're now able to spread throughout our garden, add to the tops of our containers that we're going to be growing sweet potatoes in, and so on. And so what we're going to do now is restart that process because these bins have now fully been emptied. You can see underneath here, there's nothing in here at all. And I'm going to restart it with that new Hugelkultur setup. And we're going to use our tree, the one that's not going to be producing any more fruit for us, the one that really, unfortunately, we have to say goodbye to. But we're going to be using that as the baseline for this new Hugelkultur setup. Now, in addition to cutting this tree back because we don't think it's going to thrive, we don't think it's going to produce fruit well for us, you know, when it comes to garden planning, especially since we expanded so quickly from such a small garden to what we have now, we didn't always do a very good job with layout. And this tree is an example of where we messed up a little bit because that tree is overshadowing the keyhole bed that we have in here. And so that wasn't really a problem early on, but it became more of a problem, of course, as that tree got bigger. It started shadowing out the things that we were planting in that bed. And so the potatoes that we grew in the bed last year did not do nearly as well as what we've done with sweet potatoes, for example, in previous years. So this is going to provide for our Hugelkultur, but it's also going to open that bed back up to the light that we need for the plants that we've planted there. And the roots from this tree is also leaching out a lot of the nutrients from the bed anyway, so that's not creating a very habitable space for the vegetables we're trying to plant in here. Actually, what you're seeing in the bed here are some tomatoes and some volunteer potatoes, and I'm going to transplant those out of the bed so we can get a fresh start in here when we plant what we actually want to grow. All right, I've got the bed cleared out, so now I can go ahead and cut down the tree. Now, I would say that the diameter of this tree is about 3 inches right now, so I'm going to have just a handsaw that I'm going to use to cut that down, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the limbs first, and then I'm going to cut those into smaller pieces, and you're going to see how we're going to lay it out in our setup. Here on one of the few fruit we have on the tree, you can see exactly what was happening. All this crystallized looking stuff coming off of here, and that's happening to all of the fruit. I'm probably about halfway through cutting off the top area of this, and I have to say something at this point, and I'm sure you're very well aware of it. It is not an easy thing to do to lose a fruit tree, especially if we're talking about a property this size where we don't grow as much fruit as we'd like, and the fact that it takes multiple years to get to a point where you're even getting any fruit. So it's not that I'm enjoying this at all. I'm just glad that I have a secondary place that we can use the branches of this tree and the trunk of this tree so that it can continue to help our garden. Yeah, but again, it's not an easy thing. It's not something I'm enjoying at all, but I'm gonna finish it up right now. And if you look down here at the heart of this tree, I mean, doesn't that just look horrible? Absolutely terrible. I mean, this is obviously dead, and that's where we're coming from. The bottom where all the bark's been removed. I mean, just in general, this is such an unhealthy tree. Timber! As you can see, I have an absolutely fantastic pile here of our branches, lots of different sizes. I'm gonna have to cut them up further, but I'm gonna start with my big stuff, and that's gonna go on the bottom first. And then as I move up, I'll start adding these smaller pieces as well. Well, I'm only about a quarter of the way up with the bigger pieces here. I'm going to start adding the smaller ones, because again, it's not like this was that big of a tree, but we got plenty of the smaller branches to go in here. Now for the rest of the pieces I'm going to be putting in here, I'm just going to cut them nice and small, so that way the process of breaking down happens as quickly as possible. Well, it's kind of crazy, but the whole tree only filled up about a quarter of both of these compost bins, and I cut them up nice and small, and now we're going to add our next layer. Now, given the size of these compost bins and the amount of organic material that I have right now, I'm not going to be able to fill these up all the way, but that's not a problem at all, because throughout the season, as we have garden waste, as we have additional yard waste, etc., I'll be able to come out here and add layers to our Hugelkultur type of setup. So this isn't some precise science in terms of what we put in here. What I know is that we're going to get good results based on the fact that, again, it was over a year, it was almost 2 years ago when we put this first Hugelkultur video together and the first setup together. Well, we got some fantastic compost out of it. So now the second layer that I'm going to add to this is going to be some of the grass clippings from our yard. I like to keep the quail feed bags and reuse them because they're nice sturdy bags here. And I put our grass in here sometimes if I don't have a spot for it. One of the things that the grass does is it fills in any of those empty air pockets or empty spots. Now the shape of this isn't going to necessarily be that traditional mound shape that you would get from a Hugelkultur bed. All right, at this point I'm halfway filled up in the bed, and I'm adding a layer of mulch. Mulch can be a lot of things, but in this case it's actual mulch that we gathered that we didn't need anymore in a couple of our garden beds. And now I'm going to add something really cool. Now this is some more material that I'm going to use as a mulch. If you can figure out, you'd pause the video and tell me what you think this is from before I tell you, I'd be very, very impressed. This is actually ground up mushroom logs. This is from a couple of years ago when we grew those shiitake mushrooms. These are the logs that we got. We ran over them with a lawnmower. These are wood chips, but they break down really quickly. And actually the guy that we bought this from said that he's grown plants just in this material. It's been in the container so long, it's already starting to break down a little bit toward the bottom. You can see it just crumbles once it starts to break down. Again, that's a pretty quick process. So this will make a great addition. Well, these beds are actually filling up pretty nicely. I'm about at the halfway point here, and I've still got a couple of ingredients. I guess I had more material lying around than I thought I did. And that's a nice thing, because I don't want to lose these beds in terms of planting, even if it's for a season. So I think we're going to be able to plant in this bed. Let me show you the last few things that I'm going to be adding. We've been adding leaves from this giant bag for the last couple of years, and I think I'm finally going to be able to use the rest of these leaves. Get this bag out of the way. There's so many when we started. I think we've had this bag for probably 3 years. I'm just gonna give ourselves a nice layer in each of these. Now, of course, I understand that these beds are going to sink down as the material inside here decomposes. That's not a problem. Again, I can keep adding material to the top. But if I can create a nice enough layer for our plants to grow in, even while it's composting and going through this process of decomposing, I think we're gonna be in good shape. I'm gonna add here is just some compost that we had from a couple of years ago. That mixed in with our native soil. Again, this is compost that we purchased. I want to say that this compost is 2 years old. If you don't have compost, it's not a problem. All right, the last layer I'm going to add here is some of our native soil. Our native soil is pretty clayey. You can see it there. But this is from years of opening up new garden spaces and saving that top layer that I remove of the grass, etc. And there's always soil involved with that. So this is a pretty nutrient dense layer here. And I'm gonna mix it in with my compost. That's gonna create a pretty nice growing medium. And I'm at about 4 or 5 inches deep. Look at that. That is a really nice depth here. We're gonna be able to grow in here for sure. Well, I mentioned that this isn't exactly an exact science. So one of the things I really like about this is it's kind of find what you can in terms of organic material and get it started again. This process that took 2 years that we were able to grow in for 2 years, let's say it takes another 2 years for this to break down and provide us some new compost. Let's say it takes longer. Doesn't matter, because we're still gonna be able to grow in it and enjoy some additional fruits and vegetables in our compost, in our Hugelkultur setup here, all the while making sure that nothing here, including our trees, go to waste. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's video and found it useful and informative. If you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.